Hi guys, I thought I'd do a few video tutorials on the Studio One X download that's available from the Studio One X website. Now, to get to that, you just need to go on Google, type Studio One X, and you should find a link to the Studio One X forum. You need to register there, and from there you can download the zip files, which you'll need to put within the Studio One folder. That's your main one within your program files if you're on Windows. It differs a bit on Mac, so I've been told, because on the Mac version you can have full screen mode, whereas Windows doesn't support that. However, the developer has created a few lines of code that you can add to Studio One, which gives you that full screen option. So I think that's the only difference between the Studio One X PC version and the Studio One X Mac version. All the macro toolbars and the new select options are all the same regardless of PC or Mac, but the extra functionality is just because of the restrictions within Windows. So at the moment you can see that I've got what they call the Studio One X config file on screen. Now, what you will do when you get those zip files is you will extract all the files into your main Studio One folder, and you'll find that you've got this config.cfg file. All you have to do is right click and edit with Notepad++, and it brings up this view. So what I'll do is I'll talk you through all this jargon that you can see on the screen and actually get it to a point where you understand what it means. So the first part that's really important to discuss is the very first couple of lines of code. So it says if 1 enables Studio One extensions, and if 0 disables all extension features. So basically it's saying that 1 is on and 0 is off, and that works throughout all the rest of the config file. So by default it's set to 1, so that when you put that config file in Studio One, it's turned on. If you don't want to use Studio One X, you can set that to 0 and you'll lose all the functionality and it won't be there. So this next section here, which I've just highlighted in grey, is all to do with how the mouse buttons and the mouse scroll wheel have been mapped to various keyboard shortcuts. Me personally, I don't need any of these features, so I've not made use of them basically. But it's quite straightforward. Each particular keyboard shortcut has its own hexadecimal code, and the developer has just mapped it so that particular functions on your mouse, like tilt scroll wheel left and tilt scroll wheel right, performs a particular function. So on to this next one, which is this bit I'm highlighting in grey. It says if 1 intercepts F11 key to enabling toggling of full screen mode. If it's set to 0, it passes F11 onto Studio One. So what it's saying is that essentially if you set full screen key F11 to 1, that you will lose the functionality of your F11 key on your keyboard, and what that will do is it will toggle between the full screen mode and the regular view within Studio One. Now I have that set to 0 because I have the F11 key set to display my FX plugins. So if you press the F11, it'll bring up your GUI for whichever plugin you've got on the channel, and then pressing F11 again gets rid of that. I didn't want to lose that functionality, so I set this to 0, so it's disabled and it won't do what Studio One X thinks it should do. So this next one down sort of follows on from that one, so I've just highlighted that in grey. Now it's saying if 1 hides the top menu bar in full screen mode, if 0 the menu bar is retained in full screen mode at the top of the screen. I like to see the menu bar, and what I'm talking about is this. So it's this here. So that is retained within Studio One X. Now you can have that hidden if you don't want it, just to get a little bit more screen real estate. So you would set that to 1, and basically it's now saying that full screen hides menu would be on, but I've got that turned off. The next one again relates to full screen mode, and it's if 1 Studio One automatically enters full screen mode at startup. So when you boot up Studio One, rather than having to tell it to go into full screen mode, it automatically knows to go into that. So I've got that enabled with that number 1, so that's telling that function to be on. Now also within Studio One X, there's a little setting that you can set up for the memory status. Now I'll just show you what I'm on about with that one. So in Studio One up here, there's this little memory box, and that just basically tells you how much memory you're using within a song. You won't find this within Studio One, the main application, until you've fired up the Studio One X add-on. So I've got that to update every 500 milliseconds. I think that's the default, I've not changed it. And then also this one here below that, you can actually move the placement on the screen whereabouts the memory status window is. I've left it where it is because it's fine. If I just switch back, it's just up next to this start and the song button, but you can move that across over here. So you can also change what's viewed within that memory status window, and it tells you within these parts here that I've just highlighted in grey. So 0 just shows you the memory as a percentage and the clock, so that gives you a view of what time it is. 1 says the available memory in the percentage and the available memory in megabytes. And then Studio One 2, that shows you the Studio One X XE library version and the heartbeat. I think you can actually find that anyway if you just hover over it and click on it. So there you go, you can see here it's saying Studio One X version 1.25, and then just click again and you're back to the amount of memory and the time that it is. Now this next part is basically you can change the actual colour of the text within that memory status box, and it gives you examples of colours. So if you wanted grey, you would have to type in this number here. I've got it set to blue, and what you do is you simply select the code, copy it, and then paste it here. And then if you're happy with that, you have to hit the save button in order to change the colour of the words. Now looking here, there's this which I've really not paid a great deal of attention to, but if you read it, it is fairly self-explanatory. I've not needed to change it, so I've left it as is. So that really is the config file and what all this text does. I suggest that you edit this whilst not in Studio One, as the changes only take effect once you start it up. So if you've got any questions, probably you're better off going to the Studio One X forum and posting them there. The developer is pretty fast in replying to questions, and he seems to be changing the application quite a lot depending on what's the Studio One users request. So yeah, take a look, and thanks for watching.